South Hills, also known as Sunnyhill. Our mission is to create a more just, compassionate, and in Dr. Martin Luther King's words, beloved community, both within and beyond our walls. My name is Joe Shaughnessy, and I serve as a worship associate for this congregation. If you're a newcomer, please visit our welcome table in Fellowship Hall, where you can find more information about our congregation and can receive the Beat, which is our weekly email newsletter. Also, if you'd like to be greeted as a newcomer after the service, please take a red mug, and members will seek you out to make sure you are warmly welcome. Also, the social justice table is selling Sunnyhill swag at the merch table. As a general reminder to everyone, if you have cell phones or other electronic devices with you, please silence them now. If you have a restless infant or toddler with you today and need a place to take a break outside the sanctuary, there's an infant care room in the back corner that can be accessed from the hallway, where you can still see and hear the service. May this next hour be your moment of spiritual transformation and growth. Our guest speaker today is the Reverend John Ballance. John is from the UU Church of North Hills, where he's been a member for 28 years. He has a background in engineering that he pursued at NC State. He graduated from Meadville Lombard School in 2016 and was ordained in 2018.
Come into this holy place, bringing with you whatever joy, pain, and sorrow you carry, knowing that you will be held in love. Come into this holy place with open mind and open heart, being willing to be shaped by what you encounter here, because you will be held in love. Come into this holy place, willing to hold others in love, because the love you bring is part of the love that holds us all. Come, let us worship together.
I invite you all to read along with me the words for the lighting of the chalice. We light this chalice to celebrate our common humanity.
Please rise in body or spirit, saying when our heart is in a holy place.
When our heart is in a holy
amazing how much these electronic devices work when you turn them on. So, guys, the subject for us today is resilience. While you're in your RE classes, do you say religious education or religious exploration here?
Education.
Okay. All right. And resilience is simply a fancy word for saying that you keep on doing something that you don't know how to do until you're able to do it, right? Don't let something discourage you. I'll give you an example. How many of you guys can ride a two-wheeler bike that doesn't have training wheels on it? Okay. Do you remember when you started learning how to ride that bike? Most likely what happened was, after you had training wheels on there for a long time, you took the training wheels off because your mom and dad thought you're ready to go with just the two wheels, no training wheels on it. And so they took them off, and usually if you go somewhere where there's a big parking lot without something that you run into, and your mom or dad holds onto the seat behind you while you pedal away, and then you turn around and look, and they're not there anymore. And what happens? You usually fall down. And so, being resilient, you get up and you do it again, right? And then you turn around and you look, you're pedaling away, and mom or dad's not there anymore. And you just keep going, right? All of a sudden you got it, right? But many times you fall down a lot until you're able to do that. Learning to ride a bike is not easy, but once you learn it, you never forget it, right? So that's the point about what resilience is. And so our story today, which I imagine all of you guys know, all kids learn this in kindergarten, wherever it's a spider. Have you guys learned to do this with the hand signals like this and so forth? Okay. So we're going to do that. But for just a minute, I wanted to talk about spiders, right? I went to seminary with a woman who was a scientist, and she loved spiders. She really likes spiders. So, a question for you guys, is a spider an insect? Are they the same thing? What do you think? These kids are smart. They are really answers. Okay, so let's look at some specific points. How many legs does an insect have? Right, it's 6. How many body parts do they have? 3. All right, how many legs does a spider have?
8.
You guys are way ahead of me. And how many body parts does it have? No? You missed that one, only 2. So an insect has a head, a chest, and an abdomen, right? But a spider has only a head and an abdomen, right? So a lot of people think spiders are the same as insects, but they're not. And there's all kinds of spiders. There are these little teeny tiny ones, and there are really big ones. There's a particular big one that you may have seen. It's called a garden spider, and it's as big as your thumb, as big as my thumb. It's really big, and they make big webs out in the garden to catch flying insects and so forth. And I'm sure you've probably seen spider webs in your house at various times where my wife tells me that even though she has to clean down these spider webs when they happen, that they're there because there are enough flying insects in your house to feed a spider. Because if there wasn't enough to feed them, they'd die, right? But the amazing part about spiders is there are thousands and thousands of different kinds. There are about 30,000 different kinds of spiders, right? So that's enough about the science part. Let's connect this then with the resilience part. Remember how you kept learning how to do things falling off your bike until you could get it? Well, this whole story is about the spider. If you ever watched a spider build their nest, sometimes they don't quite get it right how they're doing it. And so this story, of course, is about the spider that kept doing it until they got it right? So let's try to sing this. I'm not the best singer, so you guys will have to correct for my ability. Okay? Let's try this. You know the words, right? The itsy bitsy spider went up the water spout. Down came the rain and washed the spider out. Out came the sun and dried up all the rain. And the itsy bitsy spider went up the spout again. I don't know what in the world the spider is doing going up the water spout, but apparently they knew it was important for them to do it, so they did it. Okay, let's sing that then. Ready? The itsy bitsy spider went up the water spout. Down came the rain and washed the spider out. Out came the sun and dried up all the rain. And the itsy bitsy spider went up the spout again. Okay, so you guys can go now to your religious education classes. And next time you see a spider, look at it. They're fascinating creatures, according to my seminary classmate.
Spiders don't have even last week.
Say again.
Spiders don't have even.
Yeah, some spiders don't, but a few spiders are poisonous. So you have to be really careful if you don't know. Okay, fellows, let's go to your RE class.
Members of Sunnyhill going through difficult life events, offering the loving presence that binds our community together. If you want to get in touch with us, you may contact us directly, call the church office, or send an email to pastoralcare@sunnyhill.org. Each week we share joys and sorrows submitted by members of the congregation. We share things we are celebrating, as well as things we are mourning, so they need not be held alone. Joys and sorrows may be submitted online from our website or handwritten and submitted at the welcome table in Fellowship Hall. After each joy or sorrow that I read, please respond by saying, "We hold you in our hearts." A combination joy and sorrow from Margot Petro. She says, "I am disappointed that my final knee revision surgery had to be postponed because I got sick. But I do have two joys. My daughter Susan, who lives in Connecticut, is visiting for 4 days, and my granddaughter, Kaylee Petro, is cello first chair in the Orchestra Festival for District 1 Pennsylvania Music Educators Association." To Margot Petro and her family, we hold you in our hearts. And there are two from Elizabeth Scanlon. First, a joy. This week, a scan of my granddaughter, Sophia, revealed the cause of ongoing abdominal pain from her gallbladder. We are glad to know the source of her pain. Next steps will be. And another submission by Elizabeth Scanlon is a sorrow that her 14-year-old granddaughter, Olivia, was assaulted on Thursday at the Bradley Center, where she is in residential care. She has a concussion, a neck injury that includes a broken bone, and very blurred vision. She will be in a neck brace for the next 2 months. Please send her healing thoughts. So to Sophia and Olivia and the Scanlon family, we hold you in our hearts. A sorrow from Pam and Charlie Cook. We are very saddened by the passing of Pam's sister, Doris. a Friday morning. It was expected, but nonetheless a very sad day for our family. To Pam and Charlie, we hold you in our hearts. And lastly, sorrow from Aaron Russell Story. Aaron's husband, Dion Story, is having major surgery tomorrow related to his ongoing battle with ulcerative colitis. The surgery will be at the Cleveland Clinic, and we hope it will be his last. Your thoughts and prayers are greatly appreciated. To Dan and to Aaron, we hold you in our hearts. Let us take a moment of silence to bear in mind these joys and sorrows, as well as those held too closely to be shared. All that we have carried through the seasons of our lives has brought us here to this place, made sacred by our coming together. May we hold all that we carry in the warm embrace of this loving community.
This week we're going to switch things up just a little bit, and I'll now ask the ushers to come down and collect the resources that help fund the wonderful things we have here at Sunnyhill. The poem is entitled Broken, Unbroken by Mary Oliver. The lonely stand in the dark corners of their hearts. I have seen them in cities and in my own neighborhood, nor could I touch them with the magic that they crave to be unbroken. Then I myself, lonely, said hello to good fortune. Someone came along and lingered, and little by little became everything that makes the difference. Oh, I wish such good luck to everyone. How beautiful it is to be unbroken.
Please rise to sing We Go Home.
Standing on these mountains and
When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sun, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world and am free. This poem by Wendell Berry is lovely in its own right, but it also illustrates obliquely one man's particular means of fueling his own resilience. His choice of depending on the world of nature to knit the raveled sleeve of care resonates with us because most Unitarian Universalists crave connection with nature in the same way as the poet. For me personally, there is yet another dimension of this example that speaks to me. Before I retired in 2008 from my position as executive director of a professional society in my field, when I felt my spirit sagging from too many demands on my time and energy, I would close my office door, take down from my bookshelf my dog-eared copy of Edna St. Vincent Millay's collected lyrics and read her poetry until I was restored to my usual self. And to this day, poetry becomes my primary way to restore my soul when I am troubled. Our theme for February is resilience. What both Wendell Berry and I are illustrating are forms of resilience, but they are relatively small scale and fleeting examples of rebounding that we think of when needing a spirit of resilience in life. There are many examples of the need for resilience in our lives that are neither small nor fleeting, but learning to cope with the small and fleeting is a necessary prerequisite for confronting the larger and more permanent challenges that we have. At the outset, I think it would be helpful for me to restate the obvious. Resilience refers to a kind of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde syndrome. It inherently describes a negative occurrence before the rebound to a normal state, whatever that is, or at least a recovery from the negative event. A constant experience of an upbeat state is not as what meant by resilience. A constant experience of a downbeat state is also not resilience. It's depression, perhaps, or a bummer, however you choose to describe it. It doesn't express resilience unless and until there is a rebound to a positive or normal state. And curiously, we almost never identify an example of resilience by referring to the upbeat phase. We always first identify a specific negative event. For example, seemingly perfect marriages fall apart. We lose the perfect job. Our best friend dies. Someone dear to us becomes addicted to drugs, alcohol, or whatever. We get injured in a car accident and have to undergo months of rehabilitation. Our mom or dad shows signs of developing dementia. We're diagnosed with diabetes or cancer or some other potentially life-threatening illness. The list of challenges, both small and great, can be seemingly endless. Sometimes these events overwhelm us to the point that it seems perfectly reasonable to curl up in a fetal position and cry. And sometimes the only reasonable immediate response is to curl up in a fetal position and cry. But we somehow cope. My wife posts a cartoon of her workstation in our kitchen that shows a young woman reading a book in her hands with the title, Life Instructions. The caption underneath says, 1, put one foot in front of the other. 2, repeat. Humans are instinctively resilient, and somehow we keep on putting one foot in front of another. My muse of poetry, Edna St. Vincent Millay, describes this with a painful whimsy in her poem, Lament. Listen, children, your father is dead. From his old coats, I'll make you little jackets. I'll make you little trousers from his old pants. There will be in his pockets things he used to put there, keys and pennies covered with tobacco. Dan shall have the pennies to save in his bank, and shall have the keys to make a pretty noise with. Life must go on, and the dead be forgotten. Life must go on, though good men die. Anne, eat your breakfast. Dan, take your medicine. Life must go on. I forget just why. Some folks seem to just naturally be resilient. They have sunny dispositions and don't let much of anything bother them. But for most of us, resilience has to be cultivated. And why should that surprise us? To keep in good physical condition, many of us spend hours every week in the gym or some other form of exercise. Why should we not need to exercise regularly in our spiritual gymnasiums as well? Those of us who are not naturally gifted with sunny outlooks have to work hard at not letting the small and big things in life cause us to be stopped in our tracks, or at least derailed from where we want to go or what we want to become. In such cases, the key to recovering one's balance rests on dealing with the issues with focused attention and with intentionality. And those things lie at the heart of the reasons for religious and spiritual communities. Resilience can be a characteristic of social groups as well as of individuals. Resilience can be developed as a complex result of the ways in which humans interact while in community. Non-resilient individuals participating in a community with resilient qualities can become infused with those qualities of resistance that are characteristics of such a community as a consequence of participating with genuine intentionality in those communities. In either case, though, resilience in its purest essence is a matter of the individual. Even when someone is building the resilience through participation in a resilient community, the individual first must be willing and able to absorb the core lessons of resilience from that community. The first step in absorbing the lessons is to be able to perceive the principles, and then the hard work begins of deliberately doing something in response. This requires intentionality, and it isn't easy. Building the essential qualities of resilience requires commitment, discipline, patience, and most of all, persistence. In short, becoming a resilient person ain't for wimps. Let's first consider resilience on an individual basis. The literature on personal resilience and related issues exploded in the 20th century with self-help books from just about every perspective you can think of. I'm rather taken with The Art of Possibility by Benjamin Zander and his wife, Rosamund Zander. Benjamin is the founder and conductor of the semi-professional Boston Philharmonic, and his wife, Rosamund, is a pioneer in articulating leadership and relationship issues. The core message of their book is captured in the title, which I would describe this way. The key to resilience is developing the philosophical perspective and practice of viewing everything from what is possible rather than the problems and barriers. An analogy to this inherently positive viewpoint that you might have experienced in your own congregation is how in stewardship efforts we get better responses if we pose the money needs of our fellow congregants in terms of abundance rather than in terms of scarcity. It's that same focus on the possible rather than the scarcity. An example from The Art of Possibility that I found particularly illuminating and charming is that Zander, Benjamin Zander, as a conductor, became aware that the student musicians in his class showed high levels of anxiety, wanting to be perfect in their performance. To deflate the anxiety, Zander told his students that he was giving each one of them an A at the very beginning of the course. All the students had to do to keep that A was to write Mr. Zander a letter telling him what they had done to deserve the A and what kind of person they had become in the process. I think this insight is pure genius, since it gave the students permission in advance to become what they were meant to be instead of focusing on a grade. One of the most popular contemporary advocates of mindfulness is Eckhart Tolle, who seems to me to be a Buddhist-oriented philosopher who suggests that one use suffering as a teacher. I want to share with you a personal example of that particular point. In my junior year as a nuclear engineering student at North Carolina State University, I became seriously depressed, which I did not recognize because I never encountered anything of that sort in my life. I slept in the morning until I felt like getting up, regardless of whether I missed classes. I had no experience in asking faculty for help, so I kept stewing in my own misery. By the time I figured out that I was unhappy with being enrolled in nuclear engineering, but that I loved my minor, which was material science, and that the answer to my plight was to change majors, I had dug myself into a hole so steep that I flunked 4 of the 6 courses I was taking, with the grade point average so low that I was automatically kicked out of the university and had to apply for readmission. I explained to the readmission panel what had happened to me, and they believed me. I was readmitted, and the next semester I made the dean's list because I was gung-ho about my new major. I had found purpose. It's really painful to admit that I certainly was using suffering as a teacher. The Greek poet Aeschylus said it eloquently in his play Agamemnon. He who learns must suffer, and even in our sleep, pain which cannot forget falls drop by drop upon the heart, until in our own despair, against our will, comes wisdom through the awful grace of God. He might as well have said, comes resilience through the awful grace of God again and again. And by awful, Aeschylus was using it in its precise meaning, that is, full of awe, where awe includes inherently some degree of fear. The inescapable truth of the matter is that for most of us, resilience arises from some degree of suffering again and again, succeeding in overcoming that suffering again and again. And in the course of doing so, we become resilient because we know that we can and will arise from the experience stronger, more courageous, more resilient than ever before. It is not easy, and it certainly is not fun. But I believe that resilience comes mostly from such repeated clashes with adversity. And with that adversity comes suffering to one degree or another. As UUs, we tend to be self-aware about our directions in life and interpret what happens to us in a more holistic way than I did in my junior year of college. But we have to be introduced to that better path at some point, and I just wasn't there yet. In fact, I have struggled with significant depression several times in my adult life, and they have taught me much. I have learned to recognize when I'm slipping into the blues and learned to explain it to myself in an accurate sense and context. I am grateful for my experiences with depression because I have developed a strong sense of humility, knowing how at times I could so easily yield to my own stinking thinking. Also, my experience with depression helped me develop a stronger sense of compassion, both for myself as well as for others. In such moments, intentionality cannot alone be the sole means to fuel one's resilience. I had no intention whatsoever of learning about depression because I entered NC State University in the wrong engineering curriculum. It just happened. But as a consequence of the depression that I experienced a number of times since, I have learned to be very deliberate in combating my stinking thinking when it occurs. Through such experiences, resilience is built. It should be intuitively obvious to all of us that resilience is a critical life skill. In building and sustaining such critical life skills, let me suggest 7 principles for building and sustaining resilience. These may seem mundane, but sometimes it is useful to restate the obvious. Number 1, meditate regularly. 2, Exercise. You don't need to be an Olympic competitor or marathon runner. Simple, regular, moderate exercise is a powerful tool for maintaining positive outlooks. 3, eat healthily. Use your common sense and follow sound nutritional principles, regardless of whether you are a vegetarian, vegan, omnivore, or whatever. Number 4, reflect daily on the wisdom of Reinhold Niebuhr's Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. For those of you who have difficulty with the word God, use your version that I've heard. You begin simply by saying, may I have the serenity to accept, etc. In either way, whatever your theological perspective, this is a very holistic step you might take. Number 5, in the words of the Dalai Lama, be kind whenever possible. It is always possible. 6, build your relationships with the people you love. Recite to yourself the Reverend Forrest Church's words, there is one thing that cannot be taken from you, not even by death, and that is the love you give away before you go. 7, develop your faith. Practice it. You don't have to change the world, just yourself. I would add more suggestions, but you get the point. And you're much more likely to develop a healthy, coherent practice if you make your own covenant with yourself. I alluded earlier to the fact that groups can also be resilient. Churches can be resilient. Groups within a church can be resilient. Social action groups can be resilient. The requirement for any group to be resilient is for the majority of the individuals in that group to be resilient and able to overcome the effects of any non-resilient participant in the group. It seems to be a law of nature that every group has an Eeyore or Oscar the Grouch. I think Unitarian Universalist churches are especially susceptible to the challenges of building resilience in their congregations and in their subunits, because only a small fraction, typically 10 to 15% of any given congregation, are lifelong UUs. Most members are either previously unchurched or come-outers from Christian or Jewish traditions. Sometimes come-outers bring hurt from their earlier religious experiences and often act out those hurts, probably unconsciously, in their new environment. Reorienting those folks to a more holistic way of being in covenant can be challenging, but it can be done, and done well, if we hold them in sufficient love and patience. The path to that sufficient love and patience is pointed to by reading 468 by George Odell in our great hymnal, which reads in part, we need one another when we are in despair, in temptation, and need to be recalled to our best selves again. We need one another in the hour of defeat, when with encouragement we might endure and stand again. When, with encouragement, we might endure and stand again. May we always reflect that sufficient love and patience, and thus we all will endure. Amen. We now have what for me is one of the most emotionally delightful things I've encountered, which is to hear the choir sing I Believe. This is by a musician named Mark Miller that I know very little about. But I first encountered this choir piece at the General Assembly about 3 or 4 years ago, and I just immediately fell in love with it. It was done at my ordination, and I've used it in at least one church service in a home denomination, my home church since then. And I put this at the end for 2 reasons. Number one, to me, it's the cherry on top of the sundae for this message this morning of resilience because of the words. And second, the last time we did at my church, I sat out in the audience rather than the stage because it just sounds different from what I know up front. And I did it just before the sermon, and I realized I shouldn't do that because I was so choked up I couldn't speak. But I still have to do the benediction, so I may still have that problem. So here's the story behind it. It's very simple words. I believe in the sun even when it's not shining. I believe in love even when I don't feel it. I believe in God even when God is silent. These were words that were found scribbled on the basement wall of a basement in Cologne, Germany after the Second World War, written by a Jew that was being hidden there by a German family to protect them. And that to me expresses the epitome of resilience when you can come back from that experience and say, I believe in God even when God is silent. So now let's enjoy this wonderful choir, and I'm going to sit out there so I can hear it.
I invite you all to read along with me the words for extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we rise together again.
For the benediction, I'm going to ask that you all stand and hold hands until everyone across the aisle, until everyone here is in one human shape. Joe. Thank you. This is the words of George Meredith, an English novelist and writer. He said, "Here we stand, you and I, and all the millions of men, women, and children on this earth about us, with the infinite capacity for fellowship or fear, for cooperation or mutual destruction. And here we are, miracle of miracles, through all the eons of time, we are alive, we are here. And here we stand, you and I, creatures of brief fires, burning between two unexplored eternities. And what are we to do with this wonder while it is yet ours? So go in peace and love the hell out of the world."